Billionaire's son fails every test, until new black maid steps in and teaches him the ultimate lesson. What if I told you that the most important lesson a young man ever learned came not from his billionaire father's business meetings, but from a woman who cleaned his floors? Marcus Wellington III sat in his father's mahogany-paneled office on the 42nd floor, staring at yet another failed report card. At 22, he'd flunked out of 3 prestigious universities, crashed 2 luxury cars, and disappointed his family more times than he could count. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "You're worthless, Marcus. A complete embarrassment to the Wellington name." The young man's hands trembled as he looked out at the city skyline, wondering if he'd ever amount to anything more than his father's greatest failure. Little did he know, salvation would soon arrive in the most unexpected form. A soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and calloused hands who would change his life forever. Where are you watching from today? The Wellington mansion sprawled across 15 acres in Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhood, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. But despite all its grandeur, the house felt hollow, echoing with years of harsh words and broken promises. Marcus wandered the empty halls like a ghost, his footsteps the only sound in rooms that should have been filled with laughter and love. His father, Richard Wellington Jr., built his empire on ruthless efficiency and cold calculation. The man who could close million-dollar deals with a handshake had never learned how to hug his own son. "Success isn't given, Marcus," he'd say during their rare conversations. "It's earned through discipline and hard work, qualities you clearly lack." Each criticism cut deeper than the last, leaving Marcus feeling more worthless with every passing day. The parade of housekeepers had become a running joke among the staff. They'd arrive with high hopes and impressive references, only to quit within weeks after witnessing the family's dysfunction. Some couldn't handle Richard's impossible standards. Others grew tired of Marcus's reckless behavior and apparent disrespect for everything around him. The mansion had been without proper help for months when the employment agency called with one last candidate. "Her name's Dorothy Williams," the agent explained over the phone. "She's 62, has excellent references, and she's different from our usual placements." The agent paused, choosing words carefully. "She's worked with difficult families before. Very patient, very kind. She might be exactly what you need." Richard barely looked up from his newspaper when Dorothy arrived that Tuesday morning. She was a petite African-American woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple blue dress and comfortable shoes. Her face held the kind of gentle strength that comes from years of loving and losing, raising children and burying dreams, yet still choosing hope over bitterness. Marcus watched from the upstairs window as she walked up the front steps, carrying only a small suitcase and a worn leather purse. She moved with quiet dignity, her shoulders straight despite whatever hardships life had thrown her way. Something about her presence felt different from all the others. There was no nervous energy, no eager-to-please desperation. She simply knocked on the door and waited, as if she already knew she belonged there. Dorothy's first week at the Wellington mansion revealed the depth of the family's brokenness. She watched Marcus stumble in at 3 in the morning, reeking of alcohol and failure, while his father remained locked away in his study, drowning himself in work to avoid facing his son's struggles. The young man treated her with the same dismissive attitude he showed everyone else, dropping towels on freshly mopped floors and leaving messes for her to clean without so much as a thank you. But Dorothy didn't react the way the others had. She didn't lecture him or complain to his father. She simply cleaned up after him with the same gentle care she'd shown her own children years ago. When Marcus knocked over a glass of orange juice during one of his hungover mornings, expecting her to rush over with angry words, she quietly handed him a paper towel instead. "Accidents happen," she said softly. "We all make messes sometimes." Her kindness confused him. He'd grown so used to disappointment and anger that simple human decency felt foreign. One evening, as Dorothy was preparing to leave, she found Marcus sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at another rejection letter from a potential employer. His hands shook as he crumpled it up, his face twisted with shame and self-loathing. "You know," Dorothy said, hanging up her apron, "my grandson Tommy used to have trouble in school too. Everyone said he'd never amount to much." She paused, studying Marcus's face with those wise, patient eyes. But sometimes the people who struggle the most are the ones with the biggest hearts. They just need someone to believe in them. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had spoken to him with such gentle understanding? His father's harsh criticism, his teacher's frustration, his former friend's mockery. They all blended together into a chorus of voices telling him he was worthless. But this woman, this stranger who had every reason to judge him, was offering something he'd forgotten existed: hope. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Marcus was about to discover that his biggest test was yet to come. The crisis came on a rain-soaked Thursday evening when Marcus's world finally collapsed completely. His father had discovered the latest incident, a drunken argument at an upscale restaurant that ended with Marcus being escorted out by security and splashed across social media for all to see. The video showed him stumbling, slurring his words, becoming everything his father despised about weakness and public embarrassment. "That's it," Richard roared, his face red with fury. "You're cut off. No more money, no more chances, no more excuses. You want to act like a failure? Then live like one. You have 24 hours to get out of my house and out of my life." Marcus stood in his childhood bedroom, throwing clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. 22 years old with no job, no skills, and now no family. The trust fund was frozen, the credit cards cancelled, and his so-called friends had already stopped returning his calls once word spread about his father's ultimatum. He'd never felt so alone, so completely abandoned by everyone who was supposed to love him. Dorothy found him there as the sun was setting, sitting on his bed with his head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside him the way she used to sit with her own children during their darkest moments. Her presence was like a warm blanket in a cold room. "I don't know what to do," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "I've ruined everything. Maybe Dad's right. Maybe I really am worthless." The words came pouring out, years of bottled-up pain, fear, and self-hatred that he'd masked with rebellion and reckless behavior. "I've never been good at anything. I can't even fail properly." Dorothy reached into her worn leather purse and pulled out a small, faded photograph. It showed a young black woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "That's me, 50 years ago," she said quietly. "I worked 3 jobs to put myself through nursing school. Failed my first exam so badly the professor suggested I find a different career." Marcus looked up through his tears, surprised by this glimpse into her past. "But you know what I learned," Dorothy continued. "Failing doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. The question isn't whether you'll fall down, it's whether you'll get back up. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments." Marcus was about to learn that his greatest teacher had been right there all along. The next morning brought the ultimate test. Marcus woke up on the mansion's couch. Dorothy had convinced his father to let him stay one more night, to find her preparing breakfast in the kitchen. But this wasn't just any breakfast. She'd laid out ingredients and recipe cards, her movements purposeful and determined. "Today, you're going to learn something your fancy schools never taught you," she announced, tying an apron around his waist despite his protests. "You're going to learn how to take care of yourself and others. Starting with cooking." For the first time in his life, Marcus found himself actually trying. Dorothy's patience was infinite, her instructions clear and encouraging. When he burned the first batch of pancakes, she simply smiled and said, "Good. Now you know what not to do." When he successfully flipped one without dropping it, she clapped her hands like he'd just won the Nobel Prize. As they cooked together, Dorothy shared stories of her life, raising 3 children alone after her husband died in Vietnam, working as a nurse for 30 years before arthritis forced her into housekeeping, never giving up on her dreams even when the world seemed determined to crush them. Her strength wasn't the loud, demanding kind his father displayed. It was quiet, steady, and unbreakable. "You know what your real problem is, Marcus," she said as they sat down to eat the breakfast they'd made together. You've been trying so hard to please people who can't be pleased that you forgot to figure out who you actually are. You've got a good heart, I've seen it. You just need to stop hiding it behind all that anger and fear. The breakthrough came when Marcus finally asked the question that had been burning in his chest. Why are you being so kind to me? Everyone else has given up. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, but her smile remained steady. Because 40 years ago, someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. A white doctor at the hospital where I worked. Everyone said he was cold and difficult. But when I was struggling, failing, ready to quit, he sat me down and told me I was meant for something greater. He saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Marcus was about to discover that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is passing on the kindness we've received. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the doorway of Dorothy's small apartment, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing the uniform of the community center where he now worked. The transformation wasn't just in his appearance, though he'd gained healthy weight and lost the hollow look of someone drowning in despair. The real change was in his eyes, which now held the quiet confidence of a man who'd found his purpose. I got the promotion, he announced, unable to contain his smile. Program Director. I'll be overseeing the after-school tutoring program and the job training classes. Dorothy's face lit up with the pride of a mother watching her child graduate. She'd been right about him having a good heart, he just needed to learn how to use it. The reconciliation with his father had come slowly, through Dorothy's gentle mediation and Marcus's patient demonstration that he was truly changed. Richard Wellington Jr. still struggled with showing emotion, but he'd begun to see his son as more than just a disappointment. The trust fund remained frozen by mutual agreement. Marcus had discovered that earning his own way felt better than any inheritance ever could. You know what the best part is? Marcus said, settling into the comfortable chair Dorothy always kept ready for his visits. I'm teaching cooking classes now. Remember those burned pancakes? Well, yesterday I helped a single mom learn to make dinner for her kids, and she cried when she tasted her first successful batch of cookies. Dorothy nodded, understanding completely. She'd taught him that the greatest success wasn't measured in dollars or degrees, but in the lives you touch and the kindness you pass forward. Marcus had discovered his gift for working with struggling youth, seeing in them the same potential Dorothy had recognized in him. As the sun set through Dorothy's kitchen window, casting golden light across the simple table where they shared so many meals and conversations, Marcus realized he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Not his father's approval or society's recognition, but his own sense of worth and purpose. The last lesson Dorothy had taught him was the most important. Everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes the person who needs to give it to you most is yourself. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on Marcus and Dorothy's journey. May we all find the courage to see potential in others and in ourselves.